Right. Has anyone not seen the new Jaguar advert? It's obviously a completely different view, and let's be honest, it's raised a bit of a kerfuffle in the media. I'm sort of looking at this with the view that maybe somebody's playing a very clever game here. The paymasters of JLR, Jaguar Land Rover, have managed to gather up a significant amount of funds from the British government, building factories. I think there's a big engine factory I noticed when we go to Worcester Way, and many other investments. Obviously, the British government has quite understandably, I guess, said, okay, we're going to fund this, fund that, and keep employment, etc., etc. Now, there are quite a few sort of very, as I'm going to say, call it underlying issues with that. One factory opens, it normally causes another to close down. I think that was the case in the engine factory in Worcester when it opened. The family in Wales, I think, that was predominantly a Ford factory, was then lost a lot of revenue. But anyway, notwithstanding all of that, let's look at it from the point of view of the paymasters. So they've heavily invested into the British government and the government in them, and it's a very symbiotic relationship. Everybody's happy, and they're selling lots of Land Rovers. Jaguar, however, have been bombing. Look at their figures. China, I think especially, they've just decimated. America, pretty much, I guess, the same. Europe, not that good, and their market share has dropped, and they've lost their position, I suppose, as a premier motor manufacturer, mostly due to product reliability, reputational question marks, let's say, and sheer cost, of course. So, again, looking at it from the paymaster's point of view, how do you close a factory when you're so heavily intertwined with the government? The government's going to go apeshit if you suddenly say, I'm going to close the factory. If you put it down to let's electrify, we're going to electrify Jaguar, it's going to be the future. That isn't going to be enough in the interim to keep the workforce in place. It's going to be largely a development of new technologies and certainly processes and the build alone. I remember going to the Jaguar factory 10 years ago, more than that probably, and being quite surprised. The amount of vehicles that were China designated, and you could tell they were slightly different build quality, not quality, but build. They'd have different wheels, tyres, etc., etc. But also the fact that everything sort of came in, they were assembling a car, they weren't building a car. So the body panels came from Germany. Anyway, neither here nor there, that's how cars are built, we all know that. But the very interesting thing was, it's quite an old factory. I mean, it was obviously modernizations required to factories at all times, but it was quite an old factory. So they've got a success with Land Rover, whatever you may think of that, and I don't think much of them, but £200,000 buys you probably the best vehicle in the world if you're a super rich person. Again, my view on those is if you win the lottery and you want a Range Rover, by all means, go and lease one. I'm not so sure I'll put 200,000 in it, but anyway, that's up to an individual, and they're selling like hotcakes, as is the Defender. Not so sure about the smaller vehicles anymore. The Evoque and vehicles like that don't seem to be top of the tree anymore. But you've got this core business which is doing well and can sort of fund a failing arm, as in Jaguar. And then you say, well, we're going to electrify the entire Jaguar fleet. I think 2026, I heard, but that may be incorrect. That would be entirely electrified. Now, we've seen what happens with electrified vehicles. it's a struggle to get them in the marketplace. And meanwhile, the competition, the BYDs, the Teslas, whatever, Polaris, all those vehicles will be out there fighting for the same share of the market. And because that share of the market reflects very expensive vehicles, you no longer can go, you can't look at saying, oh, I'm retired, I'll buy myself a nice little car. And those days of going and buying a Vauxhall Corsa or a Ford Fiesta, they're sort of going away because those vehicles are gradually going up and up and up. And we're finding a situation where people aren't buying cars, they're financing cars, which is a whole different subject. And there are obviously middlemen making loads of money out of finance. That bubble might turn around and bite them, but that's neither here nor there at the moment. So Jaguar decide they're going to rebrand. They've got some executives who are very pro this, we call it woke, and I don't fully, it's just a word that really encompasses the sort of fringe parts of society, I guess, woke, or the LBGQ, whatever, which is any concern to me or pretty much anybody else until there's an issue and you get a kickback from regular, normal, dare I say, heterosexual people. That kickback, I think, is coming. But I think they've calculated this to reduce the workforce in the Jaguar factory. They don't need that workforce. I don't know how many thousands are employed in constructing Jaguars at the moment, but I think it's a calculated move. To not destroy the brand, but its historical sort of position and, form a new Polaris, BYD, Tesla type company. That's going to be a long-term project, and I'm not so sure they're going to sustain it. I think it's going to be a long, hard slog for them. They're never going to compete with those that are already in the market with Chinese backing, Chinese money, despite the fact they've got Indian backing and Indian money in them. Unless the manufacturing is moved to India, they're never going to compete. They're going to struggle. So it could be an act of sheer genius, a way of letting the company shoot itself in the foot and then reducing your commitment, as it were, to the British government and the workforce that are there at this point in time. I feel quite sorry for the workforce, but then we've seen it before, haven't we? BMC, Rover, the whole thing was a situation where you had several companies basically in the same place in the marketplace fighting for the same dollar, pound, whatever you care to call it. That's where you are at the moment with the sort of Range Rover Sport and the Jaguar. I don't know what the big one is, the big electrified one. They're sort of in the same place. You're going to be looking at, they're going to share platforms because it's stupid not to. So they're all going to be in the future trying to fight the same market. So I think they've decided that they've got to put all their eggs in one basket, and that's going to be Land Rover. I know they're talking about splitting that up into Range Rover and various different segments within that. And I think Jaguar's going to be such a small player, and they'll whittle it down to a point where they're not going to really be exposed as they are at the moment. And in order to do that, they need to kill the company, but and move it almost towards a project type company. And you're really going to be talking about massive amounts of the workforce let go. And this is a way of, as I say, I think the Indian paymasters have let them go with this because it's a way of killing off a proportion of that workforce and let them get they're back to where they want to be. It is a major rebranding, it's a restructuring, and I think it's a calculated restructuring. The paymasters that are pulling the strings back in India or wherever know what they're doing, and they wouldn't dream of doing this for Land Rover. because that would be, you'd be hitting yourself where financially it's going to hurt. It's not financially you're going to hurt them too much with Jaguar because it's already in a bad place. So interested to see. I watched the comments of all these people on these things with interest, and as a long-term employee of motor trade in one way, shape, form or another, it's quite sad, but something had to happen. They've on the numbers that the Jaguar have been producing over the last 4 or 5 years, it was never going to fly. They had to either have to come out with something really good or restructure, and I think this is a restructure. But there you go. That's just my opinion, and I think it's an act of genius by some people far away deciding that they need to get out of this without the British government hitting them with a big financial stick. And the best way to get out of it is to basically let it burn down and say, oh dear, what a shame. We'll see. Time will tell.